Well, how are you guys doing today? Hope you're having a great day. Free League has finally fulfilled their much anticipated Dragonbane fantasy RPG box set. In fact, I did an unboxing stream that you can actually find here. This game is a reimagining of the classic Swedish RPG Drakar och Demoner from the 1980s. A game some in the US had no doubt heard of, but few probably ever actually laid eyes on. And while I can't compare it to that Scandinavian classic, I can compare it to some of the recent games that Free League has done. And I did notice some similarities with a lot of their games, including the Alien RPG, which is a compliment, by the way, because I do like that game very much. But unlike some of their games that use die 6 pools, this one actually has the full range of traditional RPG dice, which I'm sure many of you will be glad to hear. Breathe a sigh of relief. The stats are going to be familiar and accessible to anyone who's played any fantasy RPG before. There's strength, agility, constitution, intelligence, charisma, and willpower. Willpower plays a fairly important part in the game, as the willpower points that they spawn fuel mages' spell as well as everyone's heroic abilities. The stats in the game are rolled the traditional way, the sum of 3 die 6, giving you a score from 3 to 18. Once you generate your stats, you have to choose your race, which in this game is called kin. More on that later. There are 6 available: humans, halflings, dwarves, elves, wolfkin, and, I hope you're sitting down, mallards. Now's probably a good time to revisit this game's tagline: mirth and mayhem. I think you can play this game in many different tones. You can kind of lean into the mirth, or maybe the imposing, dark, Scandinavian mayhem aspect. The Wolfkin, I personally wouldn't have a problem with. Maybe just changing their backstory a little bit to perhaps once humans who were cursed by a vengeful demon. The Mallards, well, again, maybe I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Each kin also comes, by the way, with an innate ability that is unique to their race or kin. Now, Dragonbane is a skill-based game. It has no levels. Everything is tied to your skills. Each skill in turn is tied to a different attribute. The good news is that you can increase your skills through experience or training. The basic mechanism of the game is to roll a die 20 against a pertinent skill, including combat skills. There is no difficulty target number you're going against, as you find in most games these days. Thus, you want to roll under your skill level. Lower is better in this game. A roll of 1 is actually called a dragon and has special effects in combat, including but not limited to critical hits. Rolling a 20 is called a demon, which means that the DM is free to impose additional difficulties on the player that rolled it. Additionally, when the GM wants to emphasize how dangerous or beneficial a situation is, he can impose a boon or a bane. This is simply the advantage or disadvantage mechanism of the 5th edition of D&D. You roll 2 die 20, you take the lowest in this game for a boon, and the highest for a bane. Failed skill rolls can be pushed, which means that you can re-roll them, but you have to accept a condition attached to the skill that you were attempting. And each condition comes with its own penalties, but can be recovered from by resting. Your character's age at the start of the campaign determines how many trained skills they get. You can be young, adult, or even old. If you're young, you get a bonus to your agility and constitution, but you also get fewer skills. If you're old, your physical stats are penalized, but you actually get more skills. And I like this choice to start the game older, when in so many games, you always have a group of 19 to 22-year-olds as the default. Dragonbane also uses professions instead of classes. Some of the professions will seem very familiar. The fighter, the bard, the knight, the mage, the thief. Others may seem a little unusual for an adventurer, like the artisan, the hunter, the mariner, the merchant, the scholar. Each class comes with a key attribute and a choice of 6 core skills. You can also choose a number of free skills based on your age at the start. Every profession also gets one starting heroic ability, which is somewhere between what would be a base class ability in D&D or the OSR and a feat in some of the newer RPGs. There's derived stats such as movement, which is adjusted for agility, your damage bonus, which is based on your strength, and your hit points, which is equal to your constitution score. The only way to increase your hit points is to take the robust heroic ability. That means this game is potentially very, very deadly. Now, I also mentioned previously willpower points, which are based 1-for-1 on your willpower attribute. Your willpower points are a commodity. They go down as you use them to power heroic abilities or spells, and they go back up to normal after you rest. Now, if I were running this game, I would have the PCs use tokens of some kind to keep track of their current willpower points, as they do seem to fluctuate quite a bit. Now, let's face it, combat is at the heart of every fantasy RPG. Dragonbane uses a system that's going to be familiar to a lot of you, with a couple of twists thrown in. Initiative is done via a card draw. Each PC draws 1 card, and the monsters or NPCs draw cards, sometimes multiple cards in the case of monsters. You can switch cards between the party if you wish, which is a nice bit of flexibility. When it's your turn, you're able to move and perform an action or a reaction. The action list includes things like melee and ranged attacks, dashing, essentially a double move, using an item, casting a spell, just to name a few. Reactions include dodging an opponent's attack or parrying it. The catch is that this uses up your action for the turn, and you are unable to react if you've already gone in the turn. You can move before attacking or after, or you can actually break it up and do both. Again, a nice bit of flexibility. To attack, you're simply making a roll against the relative combat skill. There's no ACs in this game. Armor and helms soak up damage. Of course, at times, banes and boons might be applied, and you can use heroic abilities to affect the attack itself or even the damage. When you roll a 1, or a dragon, it's a critical hit. A critical hit can only be parried or dodged by an opposing dragon roll of 1. When you get a critical, the rules allow you to choose your effect. You can do the traditional double damage dice, or you can make a free attack against another enemy that's close by. Additionally, you can say that your attack, with a piercing weapon only, found a weak spot in the enemy's armor, and it bypasses that armor completely. The game allows you to add on rules for called shots, toppling, disarming, grappling, and shoving. You can make combats as complicated or as streamlined as you see fit. If a PC is dropped to 0 or below, they will have to start making death rolls, which is a mechanic straight from 5e. 3 successful saves, and your character lives. 3 failures, and they are dead. If they ever go below the negative amount of their constitution score, they are immediately killed. There's also an optional rule for severe injuries. Short, intermediate, and long rests can cure varying degrees of physical damage, as well as restore lost willpower points. I don't think I've forgotten about those mages. Like every aspect of the game, magic is skill-based. A mage chooses to specialize in a school of magic: animism, elementalism, mentalism, or just general magic. Each of those schools is its own skill. The mage must have a grimoire containing the spells that they know. If he loses it, he is in some serious trouble. Each spell in the school has a power level associated with it. The higher the power level, the more powerful it is, and the more willpower points it's going to take to cast. To actually cast a spell, the mage simply rolls against his skill. Just like a combat skill, a roll of 1 will result in a choice of bonus effects, from doubling the range or damage to immediately being able to cast another spell with a bane. Rolling a 20 will get you a free roll on the mishap table, and nobody wants that, except the DM. In addition to the standard NPC cultists, bandits, and others that the PCs are going to end up tussling with, there's a small bestiary of standard fantasy creatures included with these rules. I'm sure there's going to be a more comprehensive separate book released later on, featuring a lot more. The thing about these monsters is that they are kind of terrifying in this game. For one, they always hit. The only roll the GM makes is if he wants to randomly choose which attack the monster is using. That means the PCs are constantly going to be wondering whether they should press an attack or save it in case they need to dodge. All right, so what are my final thoughts on the game? Well, first of all, let me tell you what I like about this game and the box set in general. The quality is what we've come to expect from Free League, and I'm certainly glad I backed this. The unified artwork is really solid, too. It reminds me of Tony DiTerlizzi's work on Planescape back in the 1990s. And I do like the mechanism of willpower points, which are another resource that the PCs will have to worry about. The game has essentially the rest mechanic from 5e, where you can recover all your damage from a fight with a single overnight sleep. It's somewhat mitigated by the fact that the game seems very deadly. And I like the fact that you can choose what kind of effect you want to do when you score a critical hit in combat. While I'm not still the biggest fan of skill-based games, I think this one does it right for the most part. That's not to say I wouldn't change a few things. Well, first, let's talk ducks, shall we? I learned that this is actually an inclusion from the old RuneQuest game, where ducks were also a race to play. And generally, I don't have much of a problem with things that can be easily removed from the game. Honestly, that's probably what I would do with the mallard kin. Look, to me, regardless of the history, it doesn't quite fit in with the deadly folktale feel that they seem to be going for. The mallard just seems woefully out of place. But look, that's just me. Some folks might want a much lighter tone for this game. And if that's the case, then I say, go ahead and have fun with these guys. But what do you think? Am I all wet when it comes to the mallards? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're there, hit that like button if you're enjoying this kind of content and want to see more of it. Another thing I might be apt to change is the advancement system. As it is, the PCs can try to advance a skill when they roll a dragon or a demon in it, which I really like. Then afterward, you roll a die 20. If you actually get over your current skill total, then it actually goes up one level. But players are also able to advance some skills after each session by simply participating in the game session. This means that each player is going to have at least one skill to advance. That seems to be a bit of a fast track for me. I would probably need to see how it runs in an actual campaign. Maybe it's fine, but in the same respect, each session, one skill advancing, I don't know. I might have to look further into that. I also don't like that because this is a skill-based system, each player can try to use skills that are kind of outside their purview. Let's say the thief misses a spot hidden roll to find a secret door. Well, don't worry. The artisan took spot hidden as one of his free skills, and voila, he succeeds. Now, some people love overlap of skill, but for me, when it steps on the toes of another PC's bread and butter skill, I don't like it so much. I would be apt to impose a bane on anyone trying to do something that is clearly the domain of another profession, unless it's also in one of their core skills too. Like most games these days, they do have a blurb about playing safely, but it's essentially just boilerplate common sense language that you should talk things over if you think something's going to bother you. Fortunately, there's no mention of silly things like safety tools or checklists. When you have so many games out there being aggressively progressive, I'm apt to give a mainstream RPG company like this a pass for this fairly innocuous language. The other thing that may or may not sit well with some folks is that they, of course, use the term kin instead of race. It doesn't seem like they tried to trumpet anything by it. I think they were just trying to avoid that whole minefield around the term. Again, not a deal breaker for me, but look, your mileage may vary. All in all, I liked what I saw here. Even though it does borrow from some aspects of 5e, the deadliness of the game seems to be a great equalizer here. In fact, it might incorporate some of the better things about 5e while clearly not having the power creep that has utterly ruined that game. If you got Dragonbane and you've played it or ran it, let me know how things went in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Well, that's all for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I do a decent range of content, and your feedback always does help me. If you like what you see, remember to subscribe to the channel and join our army. We also do regular live streams at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday. It's called The Lair. We try to have a lot of fun with it, and occasionally we even invite you, the chat, to come in and join us. All right, well, that's about it. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and until we meet again, goodbye.
What qualifies you to be a U.S. Senator? You have 60 seconds.
Hi, good night, everybody.